Imagine standing on a cold, desolate Scottish beach. The fog rolls in, bringing with it the sickening stench of rotting meat and burning sulfur. You hear the heavy, wet thud of hooves on the damp sand. But the creature emerging from the mist has no skin. Welcome back to the Mythos Atlas. In our previous expeditions, we have looked up into the stormy skies and ventured deep into the cursed pine forests of America. But today we are crossing the ocean. We are heading to a place where the wind howls like a wounded animal and the sea violently crashes against jagged, unforgiving cliffs. We are traveling to the Orkney Islands, an archipelago off the northeastern coast of Scotland. Here, the folklore does not speak of mischievous fairies or noble spirits. Here, the myths are born from the freezing, crushing depths of the ocean. Today, we are hunting a creature of absolute, unadulterated nightmare. We are tracking a demon of plague, a monstrosity of exposed flesh and black blood. We are facing the Nuckelavee. To truly comprehend the sheer terror of the Nuckelavee, you have to understand the environment that birthed it. The Orkney Islands are starkly beautiful, but they are also incredibly harsh. For centuries, the islanders lived entirely at the mercy of the elements. The winters are long, brutally cold, and plunged into deep darkness. The sea provides life through fishing, but it also takes life with terrifying ease. In an environment this extreme, where a single bad harvest or a sudden winter storm could mean starvation for an entire village, the monsters of folklore reflect that reality. They are not simply scary stories told to keep children from wandering into the woods. They are the personification of famine, disease, and the merciless, chaotic cruelty of nature. And among all the dark entities of Arcadian mythology, none is feared more than the Nuckelavee. The word itself is thought to derive from the Arcadian dialect for devil of the sea, but calling it a devil almost feels too dignified. The Nuckelavee has no grand master plan, no souls to bargain for, and no subtle temptations. It is a creature of pure, concentrated spite. It hates everything that lives, everything that breathes, and everything that thrives on the land. Its only goal is suffering. When crops mysteriously wilted and died overnight, when an entire herd of cattle succumbed to a rotting disease, or when an epidemic swept through a village leaving the young and the old gasping for air, the islanders did not blame bad luck or poor hygiene. They barred their doors, shuttered their windows, and whispered that the Nuckelavee was riding the night winds. The visual description of the Nuckelavee is where this legend transcends typical folklore and plunges headfirst into profound, nauseating body horror. It is often described as a centaur-like creature, but to compare it to the majestic centaurs of Greek mythology is a massive mistake. The Nuckelavee is a grotesque, misshapen chimera. Its lower half resembles a massive, rotting warhorse, but with powerful, webbed appendages or flippers instead of standard hooves, allowing it to navigate the crushing pressures of the deep ocean. But it is the upper half that defies sanity. Rising from the back of the equine body, not from the neck, but grotesquely grafted onto the spine, is the torso of a man. The arms of this human torso are disproportionately long, dragging along the ground with long, grasping fingers as the beast moves. The head of the human torso is arguably the most disturbing feature. It is massive, far too heavy for the neck to support, causing it to loll and roll sickeningly from side to side with every step the creature takes. The face is a canvas of terror. It possesses a single, massive eye that burns with a red, infernal flame. Its mouth is unnaturally wide, stretched open like a gaping wound, resembling the snout of a pig but lined with sharp, jagged teeth. But the absolute most horrifying aspect of the Nuckelavee, the detail that cements it as Scotland's most terrifying demon, is its complete lack of skin. The Nuckelavee has no dermis, no hide, no covering of any kind. It is a walking anatomical nightmare. When it emerges from the sea, you do not see a dark silhouette. You see raw, glistening, exposed muscle tissue. You see thick bands of red sinew stretching and contracting with every agonizing movement. Winding through this exposed musculature is a network of thick, translucent yellow veins. And pumping through those veins is not red blood, but a thick, viscous, black sludge. The islanders described watching this black blood pulse through the yellow veins, a sickening rhythm of corrupted life. The creature is covered in a layer of yellowish fat, and it constantly oozes a foul, toxic slime. The stench that precedes it is unbearable, a suffocating mixture of rotting seaweed, decaying corpses, and burning sulfur. This is not a monster that sneaks up on you. You smell it long before you see it. You hear the wet, heavy slapping of its exposed muscles against the stones. You hear the labored, rasping wheeze of its breath. And that breath is its primary weapon. The Nuckelavee does not need to hunt you down with its claws to kill you. Its breath is a concentrated miasma of plague. In Arcadian folklore, the creature's exhalation is described as a toxic cloud that brings immediate decay. If the Nuckelavee breathes upon a field of barley, the entire crop will wither, blacken, and turn to ash overnight. If its breath touches a herd of livestock, the animals will immediately contract a deadly, rotting disease known in the local dialect as mortashine. Horses would drop dead in their pastures, cattle would rot from the inside out, and the sheep would be found lifeless on the hillsides. During the long, dark winters, the Nuckelavee would rise from the ocean and ride across the islands, breathing its pestilence over the farms and villages, spreading famine, sickness, and despair. But the Nuckelavee was not completely unpredictable. There were certain human actions that enraged it, drawing it from the depths with a furious vengeance. The most significant of these was the burning of kelp. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the kelp industry was a massive part of the Arcadian economy. Islanders would harvest massive amounts of seaweed, pile it up on the beaches, and burn it in large stone pits to produce soda ash, which was highly valued in the production of glass and soap. The burning of kelp produced a thick, acrid, pungent smoke that drifted across the islands and out to sea. According to the legend, the Nuckelavee absolutely despised the smell of burning kelp. The smoke irritated its single, massive eye and enraged its vile sensibilities. Whenever the kelp fires were lit, the islanders knew they were taking a terrible risk. The demon would rise from the surf, furious and vindictive, and unleash the mortashine upon the horses and cattle of the islands in retaliation. The people were trapped in a horrifying paradox. They needed to burn the kelp to survive economically, but doing so summoned a demon that could wipe out their food supply and their livelihoods overnight. This historical grounding gives the legend of the Nuckelavee a fascinating layer of reality. It was a supernatural explanation for the very real outbreaks of disease that frequently devastated the island's agriculture. Yet, for all its terrifying power, the Nuckelavee was not omnipotent. It had weaknesses, profound and absolute vulnerabilities that the islanders used to survive its wrath. The most prominent of these was its paralyzing fear of fresh water. The Nuckelavee is a creature of the deep, salt ocean. Fresh water is anathema to it. It burns its exposed flesh like powerful acid. The demon cannot, under any circumstances, cross a flowing stream of fresh water. If an islander found themselves being pursued by the beast, their only hope of survival was to reach a burn, a Scottish term for a small river or stream, and cross it. The moment the pursued stepped across the running water, the Nuckelavee would be forced to stop, shrieking in frustration from the opposite bank, unable to pursue its prey any further. It also despises the rain. A heavy downpour of fresh water from the sky is enough to drive the skinless demon back into the salty depths of the sea. This is perhaps the only reason the Orkney Islands were not entirely wiped out by the beast. The rainy, damp climate of Scotland served as a natural barrier, a divine shield against the creature's pestilence. But the greatest protection the islanders had against the Nuckelavee was not an element, but an entity, a cosmic counterbalance to the demon's pure hatred. She was known as the Mythos of the sea, the mother of the sea. She was an ancient, powerful, and benevolent spirit of the ocean, the only force in existence capable of controlling the skinless centaur. During the summer months, the Mythos of the sea was at the height of her power. She would rise from the depths, calm the violent storms, bring the fish to the nets, and, most importantly, she would force the Nuckelavee into the deepest, darkest trenches of the ocean floor, binding it there so it could not plague the islands. For the duration of the summer, the people of Orkney could breathe easy. The crops would grow, the livestock would fatten, and the air would be free of the stench of sulfur and rot. But the islanders knew this peace was temporary, because as the days grew shorter, and the chill of autumn began to creep into the air, the Mythos the sea would grow weak. Her power over the ocean would wane, and the dark, chaotic storms of winter would begin to stir. And deep in the crushing blackness of the ocean trenches, the Nuckelavee would feel her grip loosening. It would tear at its invisible bindings, its yellow veins pulsing with black blood, its single red eye burning with the anticipation of revenge. As the first true winter storm battered the cliffs of Orkney, the islanders would hear the sound they dreaded most. Not the howling of the wind, but the wet, heavy thud of hooves rising from the surf. The demon was free. The winter months in the Orkney Islands are not merely a change in season. They are a descent into isolation. The sun barely grazes the horizon, plunging the landscape into up to 18 hours of total darkness a day. The ocean transforms from a provider into a roaring, violent wall of freezing black water. And it is in this suffocating darkness that the Nuckelavee reclaims its dominion. When the winter gales shrieked across the moors, the islanders knew it was not just the wind. It was the skinless centaur, dragging its misshapen body out of the surf, its yellow veins pulsing with toxic sludge, ready to punish the land. There is one surviving folktale that perfectly encapsulates the sheer, visceral horror of coming face to face with this abomination. It is the story of an islander named Tamaz. Tamaz was known as a brave man, a stoic local who did not easily frighten. But on one particularly dark, moonless night, as he walked the lonely coastal path near the edge of the sea, his courage was tested against the ultimate nightmare. The air was thick with a damp, freezing fog. As Tamaz walked, the rhythmic crashing of the waves was suddenly interrupted by a different sound. It was a heavy, wet, slapping noise, accompanied by the distinct crunch of hooves on the rocky shore. Before he could even peer into the gloom, the smell hit him. It was a physical blow, a sickening wave of rotting seaweed, decaying meat, and the sharp, choking tang of sulfur. Tamaz froze. He knew instantly what was sharing the road with him. Through the thick mist, a dull, fiery red glow appeared. It was the creature's single, massive eye. As it lumbered closer, the fog parted, and the full, grotesque reality of the Nuckelavee was revealed in the dim light. Tamaz watched in paralyzed horror as the massive equine body stepped forward. He could hear the sickening squelch of its exposed muscles sliding over bone. He could see the thick, yellow fat glistening in the damp air, and the black blood sluggishly pumping through the translucent veins wrapping its legs. But it was the upper half that broke his mind. The human torso, grafted directly onto the horse's spine, swayed violently. The massive, deformed head, too heavy for its neck, rolled sickeningly from shoulder to shoulder. The creature's mouth, gaping wide like a pig's snout, exhaled a thick, gray vapor that withered the coastal grass instantly upon contact. The creature's disproportionately long arms dragged along the stones, its jagged claws leaving deep scratches in the earth. Tamaz knew that to fight the beast was impossible. To hide was futile. It could smell the life in him. His only option was to run. He bolted down the path, his heart hammering against his ribs. Behind him, he heard a sound that would haunt him until his dying day. A wet, guttural roar that sounded like tearing meat, followed by the thunderous, splashing gallop of the skinless beast giving chase. The Nuckelavee was not fast on land, burdened by its massive, deformed weight and its webbed, ocean-adapted hooves, but its stamina was endless. It didn't tire. It didn't stop. Tamaz ran blindly through the dark, the horrific stench of the demon's breath washing over his back. He could hear the snapping of its exposed tendons and the heavy, wet slapping of its flesh closing the distance. He knew he could not outrun a horse, even a deformed one, all the way to his village. He needed salvation, and he needed it immediately. He remembered the old legends. He remembered the one absolute law of the Nuckelavee. He veered off the coastal path, sprinting desperately towards a nearby loch that fed a deep, fast-flowing freshwater burn, a stream that cut directly across the moorland. The creature roared in furious realization, its massive arms thrashing the ground, trying to close the gap before Tammuz could reach the sanctuary of the water. Tammuz hit the banks of the stream just as the heat of the creature's pestilent breath grazed the back of his neck. With a final, desperate leap, he threw himself across the rushing water, landing heavily on the opposite bank. The Nuckelavee hit the edge of the stream and stopped dead. It reared up on its hind legs, exposing the terrifying, skinless underside of its equine belly. It thrashed its front hooves through the air, but it refused to let a single drop of the flowing fresh water touch its raw, agonizing flesh. It unleashed a deafening shriek of pure, unadulterated hatred, its single red eye burning with a demonic fury. The beast paced the opposite bank for what felt like hours, its toxic breath poisoning the soil on its side of the river, while Tammuz lay shivering and terrified, but safe, on the other side. Eventually, as the first gray light of dawn began to break the horizon, the Nuckelavee turned and dragged its rotting, skinless body back into the freezing depths of the sea, defeated by the simplest element on Earth. Tammuz survived, but the story of his encounter cemented the Nuckelavee as the most feared entity in Scottish folklore. Yet, here on Mythos Atlas, we do not just tell the stories, we dissect them. We must ask the question, why did the human mind conjure something so specifically, anatomically revolting? What was the real-world horror that required a skinless, plague-breathing centaur to explain it? The answer lies in the harsh reality of 18th and 19th century agriculture, disease, and early industrialization. The Nuckelavee was the ultimate scapegoat for biological and ecological disasters that the islanders had no scientific way to understand. Consider the creature's primary weapon, mortishine, the toxic breath that brings immediate decay. Historically, the Orkney Islands were frequently devastated by sudden, inexplicable outbreaks of livestock diseases. Conditions like anthrax, foot and mouth disease, or rinderpest could sweep through a herd in a matter of days. To a farmer in the 1700s, watching an entire field of perfectly healthy cattle suddenly rot and die overnight was indistinguishable from black magic. The physical symptoms of these diseases, foaming at the mouth, rotting flesh, and sudden collapse, were terrifyingly mirrored in the legend of the demon's breath. Furthermore, the legend of the Nuckelavee is inextricably linked to the burning of kelp. We mentioned earlier that the creature despised the smell of the kelp fires and would punish the islanders by destroying their crops in retaliation. But when we look at this through the lens of modern science, a chilling reality emerges. The process of burning massive amounts of seaweed in open stone pits produces incredibly toxic smoke. This smoke contains high levels of sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide, the exact chemicals that give the Nuckelavee its signature brimstone and rotting egg stench. When this toxic, sulfuric smoke rolled over the island's agricultural fields, it mixed with the damp air to create a localized form of acid rain. This chemical reaction would literally burn and wither the crops overnight. The islanders observed a direct correlation. When the kelp fires burned, the crops died, and a horrible stench filled the air. Lacking the knowledge of atmospheric chemistry, they created a monster to explain the phenomenon. The Nuckelavee didn't destroy the crops out of spite for the smoke. The smoke itself was the destroyer. The demon was simply the terrifying face they painted onto a chemical disaster. The creature's lack of skin is another profound psychological metaphor. Skin is our armor. It is the barrier between our vulnerable internal organs and the harsh, unforgiving outside world. To strip a creature of its skin is to expose its raw, painful biological mechanics. It represents absolute vulnerability and agonizing exposure. In a climate as cold, wet, and relentlessly punishing as the Scottish winters, the fear of exposure, of dying to the elements, was a constant, daily reality. The Nuckelavee embodies the raw, agonizing truth of surviving in a world that is actively trying to kill you. Finally, the Nuckelavee represents humanity's ancient, primal terror of the deep ocean. Even today, we have mapped more of the surface of Mars than we have the bottom of our own oceans. The sea is a realm of crushing pressure, total darkness, and bizarre, alien biology. It is a place where human beings do not belong. By giving the Nuckelavee flippers instead of hooves, and by making it a creature of the saltwater that is burned by the fresh water of the land, the folklore draws a strict boundary. The ocean is the realm of chaos, disease, and monsters. The land, with its fresh water and its summer sun brought by the mythos o' the sea, is the fragile realm of humanity. The Nuckelavee is not just a ghost story to tell around the fire. It is a masterpiece of folk horror. It combines the fear of disease, the trauma of famine, the terror of the deep ocean, and the agonizing vulnerability of the human body into one perfectly designed, skinless package. It is a reminder that before we had microscopes to see bacteria, and before we had meteorology to predict the storms, we had monsters. And sometimes, the monsters we invent are far more horrifying than the reality they are meant to explain. As you stand on the shores of the modern world, looking out at the vast, dark expanse of the ocean, it is easy to feel secure in our scientific understanding. But when the winter fog rolls in, thick and suffocating, and the smell of the salt and the decaying seaweed hits your nose, you might find yourself listening just a little too closely. You might find yourself straining to hear the sound of heavy, wet hooves on the stones, and praying that you are standing on the right side of the river. Thank you for braving the dark shores of Scotland with Mythos Atlas. If you manage to survive the mortishing breath of the Nuckelavee, leave a comment below and let us know what terrifying corner of the globe we should map next. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to join our ongoing expedition into the darkest legends of human history. Next time, we are leaving the freezing oceans and traveling deep into the humid, blood-soaked jungles of Mesoamerica. We are going to explore the ruins of an ancient empire to find a god of darkness, sacrifice, and decapitation. Get ready to face the giant, vampiric bat god of the Maya, Kamasats. Until then, keep your fires burning, stay away from the winter surf, and always know where your closest stream of fresh water is. This has been Mythos Atlas. Stay safe out there.